So yeah, my name is John Gren. I work as director of product at a company called Gravitee. So we're a company offering and specializing in API, event, and AI management. And I've been seeing a lot of challenges in our product vision going over the last 4 years, where we have moved and helped our customer move from like API management, traditional, into also exposing their event streams. And the same mindset, the same ideas around API management. So discoverability, security, and observability. And now we're seeing the same challenges again with agents and with AI, with MCP servers. So we're seeing the same patterns over and over again. And we're trying to see how can we solve this now? What actually changes? And today I wanted to take a specific take on this through the lens of the agent experience. And I want us to, forgive me, and I want us to understand what changes do we need to do in our API and our identity platforms to manage this new type of user. I also want this talk to be interactive, and I want you all to engage together today so we can learn from each other and see what we can do as a collective in here. So I want you to take part in this talk and help me shape it together. And it's going to show up like this. So it's going to show up a QR code that I would like for you to scan and just answer on the questions that are popping up. And I'm not storing any personal information, well, apart from where you're coming from that I'm going to ask you in this startup, essentially. And everything is completely anonymous. So there's one free text field, so please behave because it is anonymous. And yeah, just starting off here, seeing where the Nordic API community is all coming from. Obviously, I try to have a reduced map, just so it's easier for you to also submit it on your phone. But if you're coming from somewhere else, please, just put yourself in the Atlantic Ocean. If you're flying abroad or coming from somewhere else, that's perfect, that's fine. All right, so we see at least 120 people are now up and live in the service. That's perfect. I realized that when we have this map, apparently for whatever reason, when I switch to the next question, it doesn't reload, so just draw down the curtain and reload the screen if that happens to you. Okay, seems like we have a lot of people onboarding, a lot of people coming here locally from Stockholm. So today, I would like to look at 6 topics in total. First, we'll look at what agent experience actually is. Okay, what are we even looking at this? What are we looking at agent experience of as to how we should evolve our API and identity platforms? And then we'll look, why should you even care about the agent experience? Should you even bother about the agents and how they experience? Some current challenges for agents today. Then we'll look at how the industry, how the market is responding to these challenges. And we'll look at 3 different themes as to what new standards and frameworks are popping up right now. But how do we solve it today? So I'm also going to show you 5 best practices that you can approach in your AI agentic strategies already today. You can look at something that I've been discussing with customers of myself, like what kind of challenges can we already solve today? And then I'm just going to have some final remarks as to we shouldn't let history repeat itself. It's the same challenges, so what did we learn with APIs? What did we learn with event management? And what can we take with us when it comes to agentic security and agentic discoverability? So first question, up on the poll again. And again, if it didn't refresh now, because you should be able to follow along in the presentation, but if it didn't refresh, just refresh your screen. What is agent experience to you? Is it humans building agents? Is it humans using agents? Or is it agents themselves and how they interact with systems, with interfaces, with APIs? All right, so we have a lot of agents using systems, which is nice. When I ran this poll like 6 months ago, when the theme of agent experience was fairly new, the responses were much more scattered, I would say. So let's jump to the next one, so the actual definition. So if we look at software system experience, it's basically how can I discover something? How can I understand what I can do? And if I do something, how do I get feedback as to what I just did? So if we look at, for example, user experience, it's about a human interacting with a graphical user interface. So human and an interface, it meets there. And developer experience, well, it's a developer or a human interacting with technical construct, with technical interface, such as an SDK or an API. Then we have agent experience. That's just an agent interacting with a technical construct without any humans, a non-deterministic flow, just interacting with APIs, with tools, with databases, if you may. Without any human really in the loop. Well, We'll come to that later, because there should be a human in the loop for accountability. But technically, when it comes to discoverability, understanding, and authenticating, that's an agent interacting with the technical interfaces. And for your API and identity platform, well, this naturally means that an agent needs to be an actual user in your ecosystem. It needs to be a first-class citizen, a first-class user, just like human users, because it's someone who's actually have needs to be able to interact with your services. So why should you even care? Well, poor agent experience, it means that your tools, your APIs, your events that you have spent hours, countless hours into building, ensuring that they solve a problem, they won't be used by agents because the agents can't find them. The agents can't understand what to do. And the agents can't authenticate. The agents can't ping a human to, okay, I need help now. What should I do? And ultimately, what happens in the long run is that if you're providing agents, and you're also providing a poor agent experience on your tools, then humans won't be able to use your agents. They won't be able to stand out with the experience they have on your agents because it's not providing sufficient tasks. It's not providing fulfillment of your actions you want to do. So it covers both sides. You need to have good agent experience from your tools for the agents to function, and otherwise humans won't use these agents. Okay, let's look at some current challenges then. Imagine you're an agent. So you've been built to perform tasks. Your whole purpose is to get a prompt from a human to perform actions and fulfill something. You're non-deterministic. You want to figure out, okay, what can I actually do to solve these problems? But you can't really find any proper tools or APIs or events because you can't discover them. There's no central catalog, and you don't understand the interfaces because you can't really see what it is. It's not documented well enough. And if you actually find something, then you have inconsistent authentication flows. Maybe you need a long-lived token, an organization token, or an API key, and you can't really find it. It's inconsistent, not easy for you to onboard and ask a user to authenticate and give you permission to act on these services. And if you actually solve that, then maybe you want to integrate with another agent because you want to delegate a task. You say, okay, I have this consent from my user, but I need this agent, and I need to pass this consent to the other agent and to perform this task. There's no standard interface for you to find this. And maybe at some point you want to make a sensitive action, you want to make a payment, you want to write sensitive data, and you need to ping a human in an asynchronous pattern. You say, okay, I want to do this, but I need your permission because you need to be held accountable for this particular task. But there's no easy way for you to just ping a human and get them involved and taking an action. And some tools you find may be synchronous, some may be asynchronous, but there's no real easy way for you to understand the context as to which one you should use. So these are real challenges that agents are facing today and will face. And really, they're not that different from what developers face when API management is immature. No real discoverability, inconsistent authentication flows, and no documentation. But the difference is that a human can file a ticket, write a ticket, can communicate and call someone, say, hey, how does this API actually work? And, okay, you have to do like this header, you have to put this header. Because an agent needs machine-readable, self-service discoverability of services. This is the fact. So it has different challenges as to what you need to prepare. Okay, new question. Are you optimizing your systems for agent experience? So I'm asking here for APIs, events, databases, websites, applications, other AI agents, where 1 is not at all, haven't thought about it, and 5 is to perfection. Any agent operating in our ecosystem can call another agent. We have optimized APIs and documentation for it. Everything is prepared. We are ready for the agentic revolution, if you may. Yeah, so as we're coming in more and more as in 33 out of 132 participants, and we're seeing, yeah, we're moving somewhere around like 2 and 1. So it's not really prepared for the agentic revolution. We're not really there when it comes to discoverability, authentication, and documentation just yet. And by the way, all of the answers, the response, you'll be able to look at afterwards in your phone, so you can still scroll back and forth and see it. So that's good. You get the full presentation also in this tool. Okay, so we have looked now at the challenges for agents, but how is the market responding to this? How is OpenID Foundation, how are different vendors responding to this? So we can actually solve the discoverability, the authentication, the documentation as well. So we're going to look at 3 different themes today I've chosen, and we're going to look at two different new trends emerging in each of them. So first we're going to look at tools and agent integration. Okay, so what tools and integrations have come up recently for agents to discover and start to use? Authentication and authorization, how is this industry evolving now to also account for agents and short-time consents? Documentation and instructions, so how easy is it for an agent to understand what to achieve on a tool or API? Now comes the free text one. So I would like for you to just provide as many answers as you want. Just what kind of standards come to mind when you think about agents and how they interact? What documentation, what interfaces, what tools, what comes to mind? So I assume these ones to pop up first. That's real nice. MCP and A2A. Yeah, and please, if you already see it on the screen, just submit the same one because it just makes the words bigger and it makes it more prominent that this is certainly something. Yeah, so we see MCP, A2A, Swagger, OpenAPI, UTCP. Happy to see that one. It's fairly new. It's basically, we're going to go into MCP, but I think more or less people here are aware of it, of course. But UTCP is basically a more documentation-focused alternative to MCP, where MCP is very like, you need to have a server running somewhere. It's more on describing it. Okay, very cool. We see a lot of answers coming in here, which is really nice to see. I like magic. All right, first of all, tools and agent integration. So the first big trend, of course, is MCP or Model Context Protocol. It's the standard API layer, if you may, or interface for agents to integrate with, or as MCP likes to put it, the USB-C for agents. So essentially, it hides the complexity of an API or event or any type of system behind a common interface. And if the agent can talk MCP, it can integrate with your services. And what is happening is that the MCP server basically creates tools that can be invoked based on your APIs or events. So you can say get payments, make payments, get staff, and so on. It's just standardized tools that an agent can discover and start using all these capabilities. So MCP is all about the tools that an agent can call. And the second trend we're seeing is the A2A protocol. We recently also saw from OpenAI and Stripe the ACP, basically the commerce protocol that emerged into A2A as well. And it is a standard for agents to discover and collaborate. So where MCP is built for tools, for agents to invoke tools, A2A is built for agents to integrate with each other in a common interface. Second one is around authentication and authorization. This became a bit messy because there's a lot of things happening here. If I have to say, from my point of view, I think authentication and authorization is probably the most important thing that we need to solve. And naturally, everything should evolve from OAuth. I mean, we built this standard over the last decade to be really refined, and that's also where we see the most of the evolution happening right now. And when we look at authentication and authorization, I see 2 main trends when we talk about delegation and authorization. So within delegation, it's all about, okay, I have given an agent consent to act on behalf of me. And the agent is allowed to perform this action given these constraints, maybe time constraints, maybe certain tag constraints. Like I allow this agent to call my email server, so uses a Gmail MCP server, but it's only allowed to read emails that are tagged with invoices, and it cannot write anything. Kind of those kind of constraints. And here we're seeing something called the Identity Assertion Authorization Grant, which is basically the JOT profile together with token exchange that allows an agent to call a third-party resource server on behalf of you. So basically it gets an assertion grant, it calls the IDP and say, okay, I would like to call this resource server now on behalf of this user. And is allowed to then call different third-party APIs. But we're also seeing just core token delegation is also very, very valuable, of course, just having an act claim that this agent's act on behalf of this user. It allows you to track the trust chain. The second one is all around authorization. So as you give agents control, as the agent is acting on behalf of you, it's very important to have short-lived tokens and very like small consents in terms of size. Like you can only do these certain actions, and you cannot break that. And what we're seeing here is, of course, that there will be more and more decisions, more and more authorization decisions happening. And from the OpenID Foundation, we have the auth-send endpoint, which basically is a standard interface that allows an MCP gateway or an MCP server to say, okay, I just received this request. This agent wants to reach this service on behalf of this user. Is it allowed to do that? And the auth-send endpoint specifies, okay, deny, permit, or challenge the user. So it's a standard interface to take quick policy decision points, basically. Say, can this agent do this on behalf of this user? Yes or no? And it also expands then in your identity platform that you need to have some kind of permission engine. And that's why I also put up OpenFJ or Cedar, like some kind of permission engine. Because even if a human user gives consent to an agent, okay, you can act on behalf of me, you still, of course, need to validate that the actual user has permission to perform this task. So it's consent and also permission that is actually bound to the user. So, of course, two very important standards emerging right now. And the last one is about documentation, because what value does your tools actually provide if the agent cannot understand them? And here we're seeing two main ones. We see both of them are built on top of OpenAPI, which is, of course, very nice. We have Arazo, and Arazo basically describes sequences or dependencies between two different APIs. So let's say you have two different OpenAPI specifications. One is flight information, and one is hotels, whatever it might be. And you want to take basically passengers coming from a flight, and you want to book their hotels for all of them, essentially. And so Arazo describes them, okay, these two OpenAPI specifications, how do you combine them to perform a task, to perform dependent tasks, essentially? And that's very important for agents. Okay, I want to perform this task. What APIs do I need to call to do it? The second one is agents.json, so it allows you to interact with your OpenAPI specification in natural language. This is, of course, both beneficial for humans, but also agents. So luckily, both based on OpenAPI, but solving somewhat different problems. Okay, so now we looked at how the market and the industry is responding to these challenges. And what I would like to bring to you right now is 5 best practices that you can already today start thinking about and how to evolve and how to implement in your AI strategies. And we're going to start on documentation, and we'll end on actually testing everything to ensure that testing agent experience is part of your software development lifecycle, essentially. So make documentation AI friendly. You need to ensure that all of your APIs and all of your events are easy to understand. And this is not about rewriting the code, not at all. Code can remain the same, APIs work, but everything has to be documented. And you have to use a standard document, so of course, preferably consider using OpenAPI, async API, use Arazo when needed. But it has to be easy for an agent to discover and understand how do I achieve a certain task. And you also have to ensure that complex documentation has AI-friendly alternatives. Somehow it needs to be described at least. Somehow it needs to be accessible for you to understand what to invoke on this tool and what kind of feedback to get if I invoke this tool. Brings us to the second one. It's all about discoverability of tools and services and how to actually start using them. So consider using, of course, MCP as a standard. Bring your MCP service into your organization. See it as a standard for agents to discover and invoke tools. Make both local and remote MCP service easy to access, whether it's a SaaS MCP server or something you built yourself on-premise. And make sure it's easy to discover. And view your APIs and your events as products. Productify them for your MCP service. So it's not really that much different from using APIs products for other consumers, but surely make sure that your APIs and your events are also seen as products for your MCP servers. And as your catalog grows, as you get more and more MCP servers, more and more tools, ensure you have a good catalog for discoverability for it as well. Because really, if no one can find your tools, if the agent can find it, there's really no use to have them. Third one, all about authentication and authorization. So naturally, I mentioned that when we look at how agents should be secured, in terms of authentication, everything should still be built on OAuth. I mean, there's no real reason to divert from that. But it's evolving. We see a lot of new standards, a lot of new RFCs coming up in the space. And ensure that the identity platform, your IAM solution, is built to support this. At least it's on the roadmap from your vendors, because you need to have new type of flows, new type of tools. And of course, move beyond static pass-through of tokens and keys. Don't go for the solution where you have an MCP server and one of the tools is an upstream API, and that upstream API requires a long-lived API key. And you just paste that in your MCP client, like, yeah, yes, here you have the API key, it's fine, I can have it here. Go beyond that and try to unify everything in your identity platform so that you do the exchange of a token to a key if that's absolutely needed for an upstream API. Use fine-grained permission, explore something like rich authorization requests, use a permission engine like OpenFGA or Cedar to store the permission of what an actual user can actually do on a specific tool. And consider implementing a policy decision point in your IDP. Same thing. Consider using a PDP endpoint so that your MCP gateways and MCP servers can ask in real time, can this agent perform this task, true or false? Which brings us to the third one, and I've chosen to group together multi-agent flows and user control. So explore agent-to-agent as a standard way for your agents to discover other agents to collaborate with, and treat your agents as first-class citizens in your identity platform, but also in your API platform, because it needs to be bound to its own characteristics. If it's acting on behalf of a user, you need to be able to audit that. I recently came across a research article from University of Melbourne looking at, okay, what's the main challenges for humans when it comes to agent orchestrations? What's the main problems we're seeing right now? How do we make humans feel like they're in control? And it's all about trust, number one, trust and explainability. We need to be able to trust agents that they're not stepping above their permissions. And second of all, we need to have explainability as to what they actually performed. And if we need to be involved as humans, we need to have a way of stepping in and saying, okay, I approve this particular action. And imagine using something like SIBA, for example. You have an agent acting asynchronously. You get a push notification through a back channel. Okay, agents now wants to perform this action, approve or deny. Consider using that in your identity platform. And in terms of explainability, ensure that every trust chain across different applications, and possibly in the future, if we can solve that, across multiple organizations collaborating with agents, that you can follow and track the trust chain. So if one agent calls another MCP tool, you need to be able to trust the token delegation that happened there. And at some point, you want to be able to revoke the full chain. Because if you have basically credentials fire like tokens issued by you that have lost their trust chain, you have no control of what's happening. You're not accountable of the actions. And the fifth one, so you have documented everything. You have MCP servers. Your IDP can manage all of the flows needed for agents, and you have proper agent-to-agent discoverability. Okay, but now you actually need to test everything. You need to ensure that agent experience and the acceptance criteria for an agent to interact with your tools in your organization needs to be properly maintained and tested throughout your software development cycle. So automate AI agent tests against tools and agents, ensure that it actually works, that they can discover, they can understand what to do. And as it is non-deterministic, well, the outcomes will be at times a revolution, but still you need to be able to test that agents actually find the tools. Okay, question now. Out of the 5 best practices you just saw, so make documentation AI friendly, there we are. Standardized tool discovery and invocation, standardized authentication and authentication, support multi-agent flows and user control, and test for accessibility. Which one do you think is the most challenging for your organization or generally for the world to solve essentially? All right, we're seeing a tilt towards, of course, authentication and authorization. Like I mentioned, is probably the most important one to solve, because discovering tools, exposing tools, documentation, we can achieve it, but the authentication, authorization, we're talking quite critical services. And yeah, we'll see both authentication and also the multi-agent flows and the user control and delegation, which of course also tends to move into the same area as IAM. It's on top here. Very good. Thank you so much. Okay. I want to do some final remarks now as we are closing in on the presentation. And the things we have seen and the things we have learned around API management when we talk about discoverability, when we talk about security, and when we talk about observability, we solved that for API management. At first, we went into innovation mode. We went fast. We learned. We understood, okay, we need to actually catalog this in a developer portal. And once we have cataloged it so it can be reused, we need to apply the proper authentication, the proper authorization. Okay, good. And now we can actually observe what's happening. How are our services being used? And then we saw events. And we saw, okay, now we have these Kafka streams. Well, can we productify them? Can we use them as products as well? How can we bring them into the same ideas, same mindset as API management, so we can apply plans and subscriptions also on Kafka topics to give real-time data to consumers? Okay, we learned that as well. We apply the same practices with the same standards. And now we have agents. Okay, so we have the same problem. We have something needs to be discoverable, something needs to be secured, and something needs to be observed. Same problems that we're trying to solve over and over again. And the world is always synchronous with REST APIs. The world is asynchronous with events. And now the world is also non-deterministic. And we need to find ways to control this. We need as API leaders be able to, API leaders, identity leaders control this new type of ecosystem. And ultimately, if your tools is documented, is available for an agent, eventually the tool will be used by an agent. So let's make sure they can. And yeah, thank you so much for not just coming here this morning, but also to participate and give your feedback as to how you're seeing the world, what standards you see, and what challenge you see. It's been very beneficial. I thank you so much for joining in and participating in this together this morning. If you have any questions as to how we are solving our customers' problems with agents and agentic AI and agentic IAM, please feel free to come up by our booth. We have a couple of people here on site today. And if you're not managing to get a hold of me, please contact either by LinkedIn or email. Probably LinkedIn, because I'm not really that good on email. I look checking that one. I'm more respondent on LinkedIn. And I wish you all the best in your AI and agentic endeavors. And if there's anything we can help with, please reach out. And thank you.